spam accounts, probably Democratic operatives, just to associate violence with that particular 9.5 million viewed one, which is really scaring the establishment. I'm going to come back with MF Global with Greg Palast. Huge developments on that front, and Aaron will be back with us in the third hour. In fact, he'll be riding shotgun with Palast off and on. But what's your comments on this whole Obama deception situation, Aaron?
Well, I'm flabbergasted, but of course, again, it's about who is behind the throne, and we know who that are. It's not vague, it's specific. It's Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderbergers, and others who are part of this New World Order conspiracy. That's what the film is really about. And that's the focus of it.
And they don't like that. They don't like it because people think they're going to hear about Obama, and they actually find out about the New World Order. Get it out to everybody. They're scared of this stuff. It's like... My friends, Greg Palast is coming up to break down the incredible developments with MF Global. I mean, do people realize how big this is? That a company could just say we're keeping 1.2 billion or more of people's private segregated accounts, and that the media hasn't really made a big deal about it? I mean, it's finally starting to get attention, but if you look at how many people in the Republican and Democratic parties, but particularly the Democratic parties, are just out and out villainous street thug type criminals. A lot of Republican leaders, they do it through big, giant global contracts, Halliburton, stuff like that. It's just as corrupt or more so. But with the Democrats, it's a gutter type thing, like with Bill Clinton. Being out of Mena, Arkansas, flying the cocaine in, and he was there with his limo taking delivery. And overseeing who would be murdered and personally raping the women. And here's another headline. Political fixer and Obama pal Tony Rezko gets 10 years in jail. Isn't that precious? Again, Obama pardons dope dealers. Chicago jewel thief pardoned. Nancy Pelosi's using Occupy Wall Street to raise cash when she's totally controlled by the corrupt elements of Wall Street that are using big government control and selective enforcement to shut down their competition. See, it's not either you're for free market, let banks run over you and let them get banker bailouts. Like, it's very free market to give them banker bailouts, can mainline conservatives say. It's mega banks waging war against the real economy. Here's another one. Where's the cash? Corzine, again, is the New York Times saying, where is the 1.2 billion plus? Meanwhile, MF Global shortfall doubles to over 1.2 billion. Anger raises as clients see funds frozen. Farm Belt rage. That's right, Farm Belt rage. Well, don't worry that the Farm Belt's just going to be imploded and taken over and bankrupted, because they've now got the Rural Affairs Council under the Department of Defense and Homeland Security, land security. I mean, that is going to keep everybody just incredibly safe. Everything's going to be wonderful. And so what if they don't pay people back and it destroys confidence? When the markets implode even more, the bankers will just take that over. It's all part of the fun. Command destruction, or creative destruction, as they call it. Does it look creative to you? The economy falling apart and you sinking into a depression? Does to them. Farm Belt rage over MF Global could chill markets when the CME Group pledged $300 million of its own money to help former MF Global customers get their cash back faster. The exchange was likely thinking of customers like Kansas cattle rancher Tim Ritzky. Yeah, that's right. The CME Group has already kicked in $300 million. Oh, but it's above $1.2 billion, I'm afraid. And the CME Group, we've reissued their press releases from a year ago, promising that they had all these hundreds of trillions in assets and everything was guaranteed, while attacking Gerald Celente in his comments on this show. Fed up and frustrated with his brokers' collapse and what he sees as the CME's slow efforts to help him retrieve his $30,000 in stranded capital, the farmer says his faith in the futures industry has been shaken to its core. Oh, I would be hedging some feeder cattle right now, but I'm not going to do it. I'm leaving them exposed to the cash market, and I don't like that. Yeah, that'll drive down prices. He went on to say, Reitzky may reside far from the trading pit in Chicago, but he and thousands of other ranchers and farmers across the country are at the heart of our futures trading. With billions of dollars locked up in MF Global's October 31st bankruptcy filing. They are likely a key voice in determining if and when the futures business remains its poise and reputation. It's poise. We'll be right back with Greg Palast on this. This affects everything, even if you're not involved in the futures market, even if you don't care. We'll be back. Infowars Nightly News coming up tonight, 7 o'clock. Stay with us. To you from Big Sky Country. I know that's supposedly Wyoming or Montana or Colorado. Those are great, beautiful states, but I am here in Utah, southern Utah, about to leave here as soon as the radio broadcast is complete and drive back to Austin. I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to drive marathon straight through. I'll be calling in on my own broadcast tomorrow when the amazing investigative reporter Mike Adams hosts the show. We've also got some other special reports that'll be airing tomorrow as well. I want to thank Mike Adams for doing the nightly news last night. Also, Rob Dew did a great job, as well as Aaron Dykes and the entire Infowars.com and nightly news and radio crew. I want to thank our AM and FM affiliates, Global Shortwave and XM. You, of course, can subscribe to XM Sirius and listen to us. We're on different channels on each one, but just go to XM Radio and type in Alex Jones. You can pull up the channels. The point is that we're reaching a lot of people. I also want to thank the Drudge Report for more and more carrying our articles a couple times a week. They've got one up there today where that Paul Watson wrote for Infowars.com. Right in the middle of the Drudge Report, the biggest news website in the world, hands down, drives more news traffic than the New York Times and Twitter combined, and Google. Gotta love it, and it's wonderful that Drudge carries a lot of our news and information, so we return the favor right back at him. If you go over there, and the other great folks that work with him, now we're going to be getting to Palast in a moment, but again, if you go to Infowars.com, you can find the story, but if you go to the middle of Drudge, you can see the article where the dreaded secret police that work for the military dictatorship in Egypt, get rid of the old boss, bring in the new boss, even worse, are now saying they're going to call themselves Homeland Security and rationalizing their activities, pointing at U.S. police and their brutal crackdowns on Occupy Wall Street that is a diverse group. But even if you disagree with Occupy Wall Street, they have a right to protest and demonstrate. Now, I'm going to talk to Greg in this segment and the next, but then we're going to take him up to the 51 break and we're going to take calls, but only on the global derivatives meltdown, only on the brokerage firms, only on Credit Suisse coming out and predicting bank runs and the possible end of the euro. The destruction of confidence is what we're talking about. And Greg Palast, I'm so glad we've got him. His new book just debuted last week. It's amazing, shooting up the best-selling list. We're going to be breaking that down as well before he leaves us. But he was a former top federal white-collar crime investigator, just like William K. Black, who's in my film Fall of the Republic. And he said a year and a half ago, he said, this is an order of magnitude, that means 10 times bigger, than the biggest S&L scam we've ever seen. The difference now is they're not just selling Ponzi schemes. They're stealing money directly out of the accounts. So he's a BBC, ABC reporter, best-selling author, multi-times over, former federal investigator, and I'm just lauding our guest because he's predicted everything that's come true. That's the kind of guest we have on here. I have a whole chapter in my book, Descent into Tyranny, where it's a transcript of my interview with him in 2002, looking out into the future with derivatives and breaking down what's now happened. The model of the global banks imploding third-world countries through fraud, buying off their politicians, going ahead and killing the gooses that lay golden eggs so you control it. If you kill and eat the goose, you know nobody else is going to get the golden eggs. So they're going for red meat, not gold eggs. They don't want a free market. They don't want true freedom. They don't want stability. And here's Reuters, what we told you about. I'm going to get Greg Palast's take on this. Farm Belt rage over MF Global could chill markets, and it quotes all of these farmers and ranchers that bet on the different commodities because they're experts in it. And I've got a family that's been involved in cattle futures and corn futures and do pretty good in it. They're not involved in it now because they know you can get burned. Even when you've already taken the money, put it in your account, it's your money you even put in many cases. They're taking these accounts, and here's the key word, that are segregated. Now, just a week and a half ago, the head of the CFTC, who we now learn was involved in MF Global, has had to recuse himself with Corzine. He came out and said, this looks, criminal, blah, blah, blah. Now there was a week-long cover-up where they didn't want to discuss it. Now the New York Times is covering it today, saying it's over $1.2 billion, up from $600 million. And the CME Group has had to dump $300 million in. This, ladies and gentlemen, could be the spark that lights off the fireworks factory, as they say. And joining us to break this down, how big this could be. You think we're in a depression now, folks. Why would the banksters destroy confidence like this? Greg Palast, who understands their kleptocracy, their kleptocratic psychology, because he studied them and put a lot of them in jail, joins us. Greg, is this the beginning of a wild orgy of corruption, or have we seen the worst?
No, this is the beginning of the exposure of some of the wild orgy of corruption. It's there. Okay, let's remember, when you're talking about MF Capital and you're talking about John Corzine, this was the guy who was CEO of Goldman Sachs. So in other words, this is the guy that lit the fuse and began the fires that, of course, blew up his company. Not that he cares. He was already worth about $250 million. So if you're out there, don't ring out your hanky for John Corzine. Just $1 billion is disappearing. A lot of it farmers' money because they're in the because it's commodities. And you're right. And so what I did in Vultures Picnic, and by the way, I've just so you know, Alex, I want to thank you. I know they think that the listeners out there in the middle of America are illiterate, but actually you put Vultures Picnic on the Times bestseller list, Alex, so thank you much. But I have to change the name from Vultures Picnic to Job Creators Picnic, people like John Corzine, right? But here's one of the things I uncovered there. These guys, Goldman and the big banks, were running this scam where they're working with the Euro countries, especially Greece, secretly working with the governments and the central bankers to pull money out of the central banks, to convert the currencies into yens, dollars, move them around, where they were euros at first, put them back in, and supposedly these big operators like Goldman were taking billions and billions and billions of dollars of losses. Well, that's on the cover, on the surface, and of course, the TARP program, you are now paying for all their losses. Goldman Sachs was turned into a commercial bank with public guarantees in 24 hours. This usually takes 10 years, and you have to show a strong balance sheet. Goldman Sachs says, we're bankrupt, make us a commercial bank and bail us out. They did that in 24 hours. So they're showing losses, but they weren't there. Those losses weren't there. They had secret agreements with the Greek government. They had secret agreements with the Italian and Spanish governments, in which Goldman and the other banks' losses, but particularly Goldman, would be made up. Goldman would be basically paid off secretly, and in addition, Goldman got about $300 million. That's $340 million in fees. That's about a third of $1 billion in fee for this scam. The purpose was, by the way, so that these governments could say that their deficits were less than 3%, which is what they need to be in the Eurozone. But of course, being in the Eurozone is like, wanting to be in the leper colony. But nevertheless, so you have to understand that what's happening in the world financial markets, it would be wrong to think of this as a financial disaster first. It is a crime scene. And like many crime scenes where there's bleeding bodies, where there's blown up buildings, where there's arson, and this is financial arson, yeah, there's destruction, but it's very, to use the foggy term, financial downturn, big recession, is missing the point. What we have now is a finance community which is a crime scene. Because, when I was a fraud investigator, what's strange to me, I don't know what, I've seen the bottoms. I've seen some pretty bad stuff, Alex. After all, I did racketeering investigations. But this is the type of stuff we used to cuff people for. Guys like Corzine, guys like Blankfein from Goldman, involved when they got caught in the scam, we used to cuff these guys and read them their rights and walk them out of the buildings like Ivan Boesky. I mean, Boesky was a Girl Scout compared to these guys, and he didn't take down entire nations.
Well, that's a question. Why did Bernie Madoff go to jail for only 50, 75 billion or so? Some say 100 billion. When these guys are involved in destroying and tying up trillions, I mean, was he kind of an outside player? I mean, he was the guy that came up with the NASDAQ.